Hello, friends. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, my podcast where I sit down and chat with other writers. It's fun, and I do it about once a week, and I appreciate you listening. We're creeping up to episode 200 soon, so I remember thinking when I first started this off, hey, I'll give it 100 episodes and see if I like it, see how much work it is, see how much it costs me. And here I keep continuing it because it's a lot of fun. I only do it once a week. That's very purposeful because it does take a lot of time. Obviously I have help with it as well. But doing it more than once a week, I think would be pretty tasking. So I've been on many podcasts where they record 4 or 5 episodes a week, and they actually read everybody's book, which I just can't even fathom that. So good for them. Before we get to today's episode, just a quick note. My new book is out, Tell Me What You Did. Please pick up a copy if you're looking for a very dark, creepy thriller that may or may not give you nightmares. And if you're an aspiring writer, my company, Unbound Writer, provides one-on-one coaching services, seminars, retreats, and online self-guided writing courses. You can check all of that out at unboundwriter.com. So today I had the pleasure of talking to author Emily Carpenter. So Emily was just fantastic to talk to. Emily has her 6th book is just about to release, and it's titled Gothic Town. In fact, it will be out by the time that this episode airs. So check out Gothic Town. She's kind of a thriller, suspense writer, Gothic, Southern Gothic. And she's got such a fascinating story, kind of growing up, as she terms it, very sheltered, brought up, evangelical Christian, very conservative household, it sounds like, in Alabama. And, quickly found herself, as a young adult in New York City with her husband. And she was actually working on the sales side for soap operas. So she kind of got exposed to the entertainment industry. She had actually studied theater and communications at Auburn. And clearly she knew she had this kind of creative drive that ultimately manifested itself, or at least initially manifested itself, in terms of screenwriting, and that kind of jumped to novel writing. And her first novel that, like most of us, never went anywhere, was kind of a rom-com. And then she ultimately discovered, hey, I really want to write suspense. So we talked a lot about kind of the art of writing, how TV and film informs how we write. And she and I think, are very similar in terms of that, in terms of it informs a lot. How her background plays a role in her books, and what she thinks about as she's crafting a story. And at the end, we made up a very potentially disturbing little story about 2 people who have the intention to kill each other after they kill somebody else. So it was a great conversation. I really loved talking to her. This is my chat with Emily Carpenter. I'm representing LSU today because my son.
Oh yeah,
my son
go
goes
Tigers! Love it.
Yeah, I'm actually from Colorado, but he wanted warmer weather, and he
Yes.
wanted the big SEC
Yep.
experience. So
LSU is gorgeous. I've actually seen the Tiger. I've seen the campus.
Mike the Tiger.
Love New Orleans. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Great.
you said you grew up in Alabama.
I did. I'm
Yeah.
from Birmingham.
And yeah, I almost worked in Birmingham at a Holiday Inn like when I was like 22. I came very close. But what was that experience like growing up in Alabama? And were you the creative kid? I mean, I know a little bit about your background, but were you? I know you were writing books when you were very young.
Yes. I mean, I was the creative kid growing up. For me, in Alabama in the 80s, like the 70s and then the 80s,
Yeah.
it was very sheltered.
Yeah.
So I grew up extremely sheltered, and so getting out into the world and then moving to New York and it was eye-opening.
Well, I mean,
Put it-
that alone is a huge cultural shift, right?
oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, were you aware of that growing up that because probably all of the other kids had similar experiences, right?
I mean, yeah, I grew up in a very religious family. I
Yeah.
went to a private evangelical Christian school,
Uh,
first grade through 12th. I was extremely sheltered.
yeah.
So, yeah, I was not aware
Yeah.
of
Right.
what was going on in the larger world around me.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And
My
and
20s were just adjusting to like, oh, this is the world.
and then what was that first experience of going out into the world? Like, yeah, as you put it, like where more than just a vacation somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, living in New York, yes, but I mean, really, to be very real, in college, I had a job at a camp and I worked with some other people, kids who went to school in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And they were like, so all we know, you're from Birmingham, all we know about Birmingham are about the riots. And I was like, what riots?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
And they were like, oh, you don't know about I knew nothing. I had
Yeah.
been nothing about the
Wow.
whole civil rights, everything. And it was all there under my nose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right. And I think you and I are probably of similar age. So yeah, that was as a child, you know, right
not that
there.
long ago.
No, not that long before that. And it's fascinating from a writer's perspective. Everyone's like, you write what you know, which I don't believe in at all. But you do dip into your past experiences, or at least I do, writing fiction, just, how you are informed by the world. And so from maybe a sheltered person's perspective, as you put it, is that challenging, or is it like, okay, now that I've had these kind of cultural shifts and maybe cultural shocks, that has really buoyed my creativity?
Oh, I think it has. And I think also, too, I've just spent the rest of my adult life and my artistic endeavors sort of coming to terms with how I feel about where I'm from,
Right.
like what it means to love the South and also hate it.
Yeah.
And my place in that and my privilege and just yeah, it's a lot. It's an onion
Right.
for sure.
Yeah. It's very complex because, so, I mean, you went, if correct me if I'm wrong, but you went to Auburn for school.
Yeah.
So, I get maybe not sheltered, but certainly still obviously in the South.
Yeah.
But then you upped and moved to New York City, which is a seismic shift.
Yeah.
I think you were married at the time, and then you started pursuing very creative endeavors. I mean, really, kind of the polar opposite of probably what your parents ever imagined. I would think this is just a guess, but like all of a
Really.
sudden you're pursuing, I think you had a degree in theater and communication, so
Yeah.
really pursuing the arts heavily in New York City, that must have been, eye-opening and probably disappointing is my guess, because I just, from other friends who have pursued such ventures, it's just like, how do I get a break?
Well, yeah. I mean, the funny thing was the day I got the job working with the soap operas at CBS in the daytime department, I was working for Guiding Light and As the World Turns, and I wasn't allowed to watch soaps growing up.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they
they
were
were
forbidden.
tawdry.
Yeah. And so, like, I called my mom and I was like, guess what my job is? I'm working with two soap operas. And she was like, oh my God. Like, I think, you know, they were happy for me, but I think they were afraid
Of course.
that I was going to get pulled into, the darkness and degradation. And
Yeah, and I think that's irrespective of whoever you are or whatever your religion is. If you're a parent, that's scary.
it is, yeah,
Once your kiddos are out in the world, you have to learn to let go, but that doesn't mean you stop being concerned.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, probably the only scarier step would have been had you gone to Hollywood instead of New York City.
Oh yeah. And I think, the fact that I was married, I think gave them some sort of security that I wasn't gonna go completely off the rails and that I was,
Yeah.
sort of taken care of.
So
So,
what was what was your husband doing at the time in terms of jobs? And then what was your pull? Like, in my imagination, I'm picturing somebody who has kind of been exposed to the theater. Obviously, communications is very people facing. And I could picture you almost being like, I don't know what to do, but I just want to be in this
yes,
scene.
yes.
Um, what was speaking to you the most?
Well, so we had gone up there for his job. He had a job on Wall Street, and
Okay.
that was kind of our plan.
Yeah.
And you're right. You describe it perfectly. I was very entertainment adjacent,
Yeah.
and like I always loved reading and writing. But then when I got into high school and college, I loved acting, and I really wanted to be an actor. Um, but I didn't quite have that. Again, I was very sheltered and didn't quite know how to go about doing it.
Right.
And so once I got to New York, I was like, okay, I really need to get a job because it's super expensive here. And, my husband's job paid well, but like we needed more money.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting the job at CBS. And that initially was in uh, the primetime and late night sales. So it was the whole sales department. And that was like a really cool thing to kind of experience the TV sales, like how the money is made.
Right.
Um, so that was very educational, but I wanted to get closer to production. I wanted to see the actors. And so, yeah, I kind of pivoted and ended up getting this other job in daytime programming. And it was like right next door to the casting office as well. So I was seeing actors come in, and the casting people were pulling me in to read with actors, and that was really cool. But I didn't know. I mean, I was so young. I was like 22,
But
23,
that's
and
the time to do all that stuff.
yeah, I really feel like it was kind of my grad school
Yeah.
experience.
100%.
Yeah, seeing what was out there. And like I wrote a spec script for my boss for Guiding Light, and
Hmm.
she gave me a lot of encouragement. She was like, I think you're a really good writer. And it just little things like that sort of put me on a very sort of crooked path.
Yeah, so you were being exposed obviously to storytelling, like,
Yeah.
a very specific type of storytelling. And then when did the novel writing bug finally where you're just like, all right, let me just give this a try.
Well, it was a very sort of pragmatic decision because when I left New York, what I really wanted to do was, so this was the 90s. This was kind of that boom of indie film
Yeah,
and, screenplays selling for $5 million
right.
and the golden age of
Right.
Hollywood. And so I really wanted to be a screenplay writer, and I was working on screenplays and I was entering contests. I, of course, didn't have an agent, and I also was starting my family. And so I didn't, it was just what it turned out to be was just a really hard business to break into
Of
if you
course.
were not living in
I
LA.
was about to say, yeah, it's still in New
Yeah,
York, right?
back then, for
Right.
sure. And so it took me a while to figure that out. I mean, I placed in some contests and got enough encouragement that I thought, okay, I'm not terrible at this.
Right.
And then one day I remember I was walking with my dog, and I thought, you know what might be easier to get a move to get to like write a movie is to write a book that someone adapts
Yeah.
into a movie, maybe that's an
That
easier
is
business.
beautifully naive thinking.
Oh, I was like,
Yeah.
that's my whole life is like naive, idealistic, but the truth of the matter was it was back then a little bit easier to break into
That's
than
fascinating. And it's
Hollywood.
also, I think I'm a big proponent of naivete when you're starting out because I was the same way. I approached writing with zero. I just started writing, but I didn't know anything. And that helps with the rejections because you're like,
It
of
does.
course you should reject me. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And you learn a little bit at a time because if you were to sit down and honestly look at the landscape, even in the 90s, and say, a pragmatic path to success is through screenwriting or through novel writing, you would never go anywhere because you'd be too scared
Right.
because you'd hear all the stories.
Right.
Um, so, but you took that idea and wrote a book.
I did.
And then
And
and then that's a very different thing, right? Because you're going
yeah,
from writing 90% dialogue and 10% set direction to
right.
400 pages of, dialogues, maybe 20% of it.
Yeah. What it was the same in the way that I used that Sid Field screenplay book
Hmm.
um, to map out my novels. And I've never not used that
Oh,
template.
interesting. Okay.
Um, so I feel like I learned a lot, but yeah, that first book, it was rejected by 162 agents.
And that was kind of rom-commy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was in that phase of like Bridget Jones,
Yeah.
Chick lit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, obviously is huge and certainly was huge,
Yeah.
back then, but you have to just, right. So it's not easier. I mean, that's what we're hearing today, obviously, is like it's terribly hard to even get an agent or even have an agent even look,
Yeah.
much less get a publishing deal done.
That.
Did you get enough, aside from 175 rejections being its own form of feedback, did you get any helpful feedback that's like, well, here's kind of where our struggles with this manuscript are?
You know what I heard a lot, and again, this was a learning experience for me, and I feel like I have really thick skin now. Like it doesn't hurt me if
Right, right,
somebody does, like I don't care.
right.
Um, I want people to like what I write, but
Of course.
um, what they told me was, I love your writing. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to sell this. I
Right,
don't know what genre this. And so that got me thinking in a little bit more of a marketing mindset, which we all have to have as authors, which is, what am I writing and who am I writing it for?
right.
And that really helped me think about what I wanted to write next, which was a suspense book. And round about that time was when I read Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, this is
This
what
is
I
how
like."
it's done. Right.
Yeah, and this is got it had everything. I was like, "Oh, this is me. Like this is gothic. This is creepy. This is like female. This is
Right.
her was a little Midwest, but like Southern and creepy and yeah,
Yeah, I think I see it a lot too because I'm also a writing coach, and you see kind of aspiring writers who write well. So you're reading something and it's got great scenes and it's got interesting characters, that it's easy, I think, to not understand like what is the through line of the story, what's actually happening, as opposed to a collection of kind of well written scenes.
right,
And sometimes that's a very fine line, right? Where you're just like, it's not quite connecting and it's almost hard to tell. But what you can tell is like, oh, this is a newer writer. And it's not even so much that okay, this person's focused on the market, because you don't necessarily want that either. But the
right.
market just means what's a story that's compelling to a broad group of people, that also has great characters, interesting scenes, things like that, and you got to bring it all together. And for me,
And I
that
think
just takes time.
Yeah, and I think it's always been very helpful for me to think of it in terms of film because a film does that
Right.
in 2 hours. It has a tone to it, it has a look. It's a whole entity and you know what it is. I mean, you
Right.
go to Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag, and you know exactly he knows what he's doing, start to
Right.
finish.
Right.
It's stylish. It's,
Right.
the dialogue, it's tightly constructed. It's a thing. It's a spy story. So that really helped me like loving film. That helped me look at my books in that way a
Yes.
little bit more, which
Yeah.
I think is very helpful to me as I'm writing, but also to my agent and my editor and the marketing team.
I couldn't agree with you more. My mind is the same way. I don't read a lot of my own genre, but I'll definitely watch. Like I love a good suspense thriller limited series that's kind of out there and dark and but different. So I think very cinematically when I'm writing, and I think what that helps you do, particularly as a suspense author, is to dial up the propulsion of it. Because I think
Yeah,
the fears when you first start out as a novelist and you're thinking about films, you think of Steven Soderbergh and you're like, oh, the way he shot this scene, showing the landscape tells me so much. Well, I can't do that in a novel. So I think the crutch is to just over describe to fill in those blanks.
yeah,
And what you're doing is you're slowing the book down.
yeah,
And so, but that takes time to learn too. You can't just translate cinema to page and just have these lengthy descriptions. So
yeah.
you, and then it sounds like you also just found intuitively what you're passionate about. You're like, oh, rom-com, I thought maybe I was good at, and maybe I am good at it, but what I really want to write is the edgier, darker, hand on the throat kind of stuff. So you wrote that first book, suspense novel, and then what happened with that?
So that's the book that got me my agent
Yeah,
and my first book deal.
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
And having written obviously screenplays and then having written one novel that didn't go anywhere, that's still a pretty fast track. you know,
Yeah, I did have one like half like two actual false starts before that. Before I realized I literally asked myself like what do I like to read, watch, and it was suspense thriller. I
yeah,
just was very afraid of writing a mystery because I didn't know how to put in the clues.
right,
So
right.
just I had to get over that and just like trust myself that I could figure it out.
Yeah, well, and that's a great way to, because I say that all the time. Trust the story; it's in there; it'll come out. But true mysteries, I think, are tricky. So I write thrillers, and so I'm not necessarily trying to, have a whodunit. I'm on page 3. I might say, yeah, this is who did it.
Right.
But people will still read it and be like, oh, I guessed and this and that. I'm like, well, that's not my intention. My intention is just to tell you the story. That being
Yeah.
said, you do think of that twist and you're like, all right, now I got to go and back layer just the right amount of foreshadowing in, just the right amount of clues. So it can be a little bit tricky like that. But when they bought that as a 2-book deal, did they buy that as we want more of the same character, or just like, hey, we just want another standalone?
Just another
That's
standalone.
great.
Yeah, it's never so mine are more like I call them suspense.
Yeah, me
So
too.
and I think thriller sometimes lends itself maybe to a series, but yeah, I've only ever done standalones. And one of the books, I my fifth book was actually sort of a prequel sequel to the first book I wrote, so it's connected in a way. But yeah, I've never done a series.
Yeah, I haven't either. I mean, I remember starting out and I wrote a book and it was my agent who told me it was a thriller. I'm like, okay. But I never had an intention to write series. But when I started to kind of posit that to the publisher, they're like, well, hold on there. we don't know how this book is going to sell. So why would we want to commit to 3 or 4 in a series that doesn't
Right,
do well?
right.
But then I just got more interested in writing standalones. They
Yeah.
might have connective tissue,
Yes.
um, but I love, my 10th just came out and I love like, where are we going next? Who are we going to do? Like, isn't that the best part of it?
Oh my gosh, congratulations. 10th
Thanks.
book. That's amazing. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I have what my husband calls it ideaphoria, where I get like a lot of ideas
Yeah,
and not all of them are good or workable, but yeah, I love the fact that I can explore new ideas with every book for sure.
totally. Now, if I can ask, I'm curious about, again, I'm so fascinated by the psychology of writing, the roots of writers, how their past informs their writing. And, you had such a specific childhood. How did your very, I'm guessing, fairly strict religious upbringing inform how you write today? Did you stay within the religion, or are you are you something else now? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely always present. I will say, like when I was growing up, I remember thinking in movies and books that uh I never saw myself in a book or a movie. I never
Mm,
saw an evangelical
mm,
like white girl in it,
yeah,
which is weird to say that. But it was just like there weren't books or movies that had to do with any kind of evangelical like Protestant Christianity. And so I always thought that was kind of weird.
mm,
And what I love is now we see all kinds of it. Like
right.
you know, it's out there a lot. And I really love that. I will say that I am still probably a believer that has a lot more questions
Hmm.
um,
Right.
than, I
Right.
knew all the answers when I was 16 because
Right.
I
Right.
bought them.
Right. Right.
But like now I would say I'm a believer who doesn't attend church
Right.
on a regular basis.
Well, I'm always fascinated by, children kind of know what their, whatever that environment is given to them is, and that can manifest itself in a million different ways, good or bad or whatever. But what is so fascinating is when, like you said, you had all the answers at 16, and then at 18, when the true innate curiosity kicks in. And I think it's curiosity that propels writers more than anything else. And like, why is this? Why is that? And I don't know, but let's write about it, or let's explore that, and maybe I'll come back to the same place I started from, which is great. But I had some questions answered along the way.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty interesting. Do you feel like now, like, do you see in movies and TV shows, do you see that white girl evangelical? Like you mentioned
Yeah.
that, and I'm trying to kind of think, because if you have a book or a movie and you have something, I'll call it specific, like an evangelical. Okay, well, what is the reason for that? And my reasoning is usually, well, why not? Like, it doesn't have
Right.
to necessarily play a big role. That's just who she is. In my mind, that's who she is. But I
Right.
think conventional wisdom dictates like that has to be a major part of the story.
Right. Right.
Um, and so maybe that's why you don't see it that much. But I'm just trying to think of examples where that's
Yeah, I don't know that I wanted it to be a big part of the story. I'm with you. I was just kind of like, where are the people that are just like that go to church and like
right,
seemed and like I'm completely blanking on anything now,
right, right,
but
right. Yeah,
it's much more accepted. Like I'm watching White Lotus, right? And
yes. My partner and I are too. Yeah,
yeah, the character of Leslie Bibb, and she's like, "Oh, we go to this great church in Austin." I'm like, "There she is."
right.
There's,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Totally. But that almost was presented to mock her. In a,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay. I'm like, if I'm not saying the the character who goes to church should be like revered or,
Right.
is
They just happen to go to
around.
church. That's who they
But
are.
yeah, they could be the villain or they can be, mocked or they can be a great person.
Right.
Yeah, it was such a part of my Southern kind of Bible Belt suburban upbringing. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't have to go down it too much, but I just think about, you think about like Christian rock, and it's like, well, why can't it just be rock?
right. Well, no, that goes back to that like fearfulness of like,
Yeah,
let's keep everybody and just to pivot a little, I will say, like, I feel like in my books, I am always, and this isn't about religion, but I am very interested in that question of what is on the other side of that veil.
100%. Yeah,
What is really going on that we can't perceive or see, or that maybe we can partially perceive.
right, right.
Yeah.
And
So
I think that's a cornerstone to thrillers and suspense novels is, I'm a firm believer that, those types of books really need to be kind of emotion forward, especially if you're, especially with what I write, more like the domestic thrillers, small cast, small town kind of a thing, not big financial espionage thrillers, need to really be about those people having those questions because of these external forces that are almost forcing them to wonder, like, about the nature of good and evil, about the nature of religion and what's on the other side, all that stuff. I love that because you as the writer can explore that yourself through the process, kind of from a safe distance, but you can get to some pretty dark places.
well, yeah, and frankly, we deal with crime and
Right,
death.
right.
And so those questions of, what happens after death and what do the dead are, what kind of connection do we have to the dead? And that gets into the very, like a little bit the gothic
Right,
that
right.
I tend to
Totally.
write about a lot.
Right.
So,
And your new book Gothic Town, now that comes out, it'll be out by the time this airs, but as we record this, I can think it's out like next week or something, or in a couple weeks. Yeah.
yeah, Tuesday. So
That,
less than a week. Yeah.
that's
The
amazing. So
25th. Yeah.
as it does it what number is this for you?
Six.
Six
Number
published. All right.
six.
So
Yeah.
you're at a place now where you're like, you almost kind of have like expectations, you kind of been through it, but it's still exciting, and it still is kind of the sense of like, I have no idea how this book is going to do. It could do worse, it could do way better. Like, are you in that space right now?
Yeah. Yeah. We're like, we've been through it, right?
Yeah.
So we have that like the gimlet eyed, we're the old Sarge at the back of the,
Right. Right.
I don't know, war like metaphors. But yeah, so just said this the other day to a friend. I'm like, it could be either a runaway success or an abject failure or somewhere in between, which is
Yeah.
probably where
Right. Right.
everything is somewhere in between.
Right. And you never know. And you're always kind of guessing, like, okay, that was great. What can we mix up for next time? How has
Yeah.
the market changed in the
Yeah.
next year? And what I've learned over time, over 20 years, is just like, whatever happens, it's going to be a surprise. It's not going to
Yeah.
be what you think,
Right.
for good or for worse. And
Right.
so you keep at it. You do all the things you're supposed to do. You take chances, and then you kind of let go.
Yeah. And what I've learned is the most fun, the most rewarding part of this is when it's me and my computer and my brain
Right.
in the story.
Right. Totally.
That's fun.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
hands down.
Totally. And that's a sacrosanct part of my day, even though it's just an hour a day. And I don't outline. So I'm like, what happens? What happens today? I'm so excited to find out. And
Yeah.
it might be a struggle. And I'm not saying writing's always easy and fun. A lot of times it's incredibly difficult. But because of that joy you just described is what makes it all worthwhile. And then there are those moments
Ugh.
where you're just like, oh my God, I think this happens. And I have no idea what that means, but I'm going to write it because I feel it in my soul.
Yeah. And I think, we are really lucky or blessed or however you want to put it to have that in our lives, that we have that ability to create those stories and to be inspired. It's a gift for
Yeah,
sure.
totally. Well, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our little storytelling on our own. So I've selected three books kind of at random. These are all autographed copies, so they sit in a certain part of my bookshelf. So I just grabbed three from there. We're
Okay.
going to choose one of these books, a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and then that'll be the first sentence and maybe a 2 minute long short story. So I'll read that sentence. You give me the next one or two sentences that just pops into your brain. I'll do a
Okay.
couple sentences.
Okay.
So we just alternate back and forth, a little bit of improv, and then when it totally goes off the rails, I'll call it off. And it will go off the rails.
Oh, good. I love
Um,
that. Truly.
so
Yeah.
this is actually it's called When I Died for the First Time by Tim Booth. He's a singer, and it's fiction. It's a novel, but it's fantastic. And kind of calling back to who you were referring to earlier, I've Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. I also have Sharp Objects, but that one's not signed. And then the very directly titled The Girl Who Died by Ragnar Jonasson. So all, yeah, not all thrillers, but so choose one of those.
I have to go with Gone Girl. Sorry.
I figured you
Yeah.
would. That's quite all right. So give me a number between 1 and 415.
Okay, so I want 78.
Oh, that's a good one. I can tell already. I am going to quickly scan. Um, oh, it's interesting. I think this actually might be from her journal.
Oh God.
Um, I'm just going to read this, and you do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
It was a gross, tasteless thing to say.
I wish you were dead. He looked at me and I looked at him and I said,
Um, Thank you for finally telling me that. I looked at his expression, which went from a twisted snarl to completely flat. And then I added, I've been meaning to tell you the same thing.
so now that we have that out of the way, how are we going to deal with Billy Joe?
He turned his head and spit on the ground, something he does from time to time whenever he wants to buy himself a couple seconds to think. He turned to me and said, well, I know he's home right now, and we can go take care of him. But I'm afraid once we do that, you might just get a little carried away and take care of me. So I'm not sure how we can be partners if I just don't trust you.
I have an idea, I said. You take the shotgun, I'll take the knife, but I'm driving.
Oh, I think we call it there because I love the visual of the. First of all, I was kind of really intrigued by the idea of two people admitting that they wanted to kill each other and maybe very literally meaning it, and then what that conversation looks like after that. It's like, well, how do you want to do this?
But we have to team up.
Right, right. Oh, so you great tension. Like that car ride, like I want to see that car ride.
Yeah. And I want to see how they take care of Billy Joe with the shotgun and the knife.
Right. And then ultimately does that act of murder bring them together?
I think
Like,
it
I'm
might.
good. I'm good with you now.
I feel like it might.
That was great. Well, Emily, congratulations on the release of Gothic Town. And by the way, I love not only do I love the title, I love the cover. It's very on point, and it's going to look very striking in the bookstores. So that's very exciting, and congratulations on all your success. And what a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you. It was so great to meet you. Thanks for having me. This
Yeah.
was a blast.
Take care. Talk to you soon.
All
Bye.
right.
So that's it. That is my conversation with Emily Carpenter. She she's got a good vibe, good energy, passionate about what she does. I really enjoyed talking to Emily. Her new book again is Gothic Town. Please check that out. And if you want to read all about Emily, you can just go to her website, which is emilycarpenterauthor.com. You can pop on over to carterwilson.com and look at all my 10 books. You can buy any or all of them. Check out my newsletter, my blog, my appearances, more episodes of Making It Up. And then if you head on over to unboundwriter.com, if you're an aspiring writer or a struggling writer, you can investigate some of the services we offer, one-on-one coaching, seminars, retreats, and all that good stuff. So that is it, folks. I am out of things to say. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. Another episode will be out next week. In the meantime, as always, thank you for watching and or listening. Take care.